Yes, that's right. It's Lock It Up Sportstalk on the Fine Tunnel Network and on ASTV, our debut on ASTV. My name is Logan Lockhart. We do this every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central. And let's introduce ASTV to our hockey guy, Chris Faria, who joins us quite often. A little insight on hockey, always fun, always a blast. When Chris joins us, Chris, how's it going? Thank you for joining me again.
It's going great. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing today, Logan?
I'm doing well. I enjoyed the deadline for what it was. It's been a weird year. It took me a minute to realize that we're in April and the trade deadline's going on. I had to look at the calendar and do a double take. There's baseball and then the trade deadline. Weird stuff. But look, the story in Leafs land was Nick Foligno, and the price that Kyle Dubas paid. People were wondering. They said, a first-round pick? Are you kidding me? Look what Kyle Palmieri went for to the Islanders. Look at what the Bruins get for Taylor Hall. Were you surprised that it took a first for Nick Foligno?
Yeah, like you said, based on the market, I was a little bit surprised, especially considering the price for Taylor Hall was considerably cheaper. But I think the way the Leafs looked at it is, first of all, in his press conference yesterday, Kyle Dubas made it pretty clear the Leafs were not interested in Hall, for whatever reason. Maybe it was just, the type of player he is, or maybe they truly think he's, not much of a superstar anymore. But you look at what the Leafs gave up, and a first-round pick for next year, in an ideal world for what the Leafs are hoping to do in this postseason run, that's, going to end up being something around the 27th, 28th, maybe even the 31st or 32nd pick, I guess, when Seattle joins. But yeah, so it's basically going to be a second-round pick at that point, in which case, fair deal.
But let's go back to Hall here. Were you surprised at the trade value that he garnered? I thought the Sabres would demand a first-round pick. And if they didn't get it, that's fine. And I like what the Sabres did here. They waited until, the last minute, relatively. They could have traded him weeks ago. They didn't. They held on to him. So I like that aspect of it. But were you surprised at what Boston had to give up?
Yeah, for sure. Like former Hart winner, only what, 2-3 seasons ago. I think the big thing about Hall is a lot of people don't realize he's shooting, something around 2% this season, which is just, it's not sustainable. I know he's more of a playmaker, not a goal scorer, by any means, but he's definitely more of like a 20+ goal guy. I think he's still in a regular season on a good team going to give you at least 60-70 points minimum. Like I think the guy's a first line talent for sure. He's still producing chances and one of the best passers in the league still, even in this goal scoring slump. So I think you put him on a good team like Boston, you give him the right line mates, with a chance to win the cup potentially. I think he is going to pick up his game for sure. I think they got him for a steal.
Let's look at the Leafs roster right now. Why do you think Foligno was a target? And where does he fit on this team?
Yeah, great question. We heard from Dubas again yesterday saying the emergence of Galchenyuk kind of changed their plans. So I originally did think they were going to go for more of a scoring winger to add to that Tavares line, maybe a little scoring punch. But they obviously decided to go with a little bit of a different look where, Foligno is more of like a 30-40 point guy at this point in his career, but he still is one of the best defensive wingers in the league. So it's kind of like you're adding, as I described in one of my pieces earlier this week, a Zach Hyman light, right? Where he's going to muck it up in the corners. He's going to play hard, physical hockey, especially in the playoffs. And, he's going to give you a little bit of a scoring punch, but he's going to fit nicely into, either a second or third line role where he can really kind of complement the Leafs in an area where they're a bit weaker, which is on the defensive side.
Yeah, the emergence of Galchenyuk, because let's go back pre-Galchenyuk into the lineup. It was all about we're adding a top six forward. It was one of the worst kept secrets on the trade market. Kyle Dubas wanted to add a top six forward. That seemed to have disappeared now. And the target here was Nick Foligno. Failure or success of a trade deadline for the Leafs? And you could say neither. You could say, look, we're in the middle here, and it's not fair to say either way. But would you define it as either a failure or success?
For me, it's an absolute success. Like, I think they had three needs going to the deadline. They needed a top 6, top 9 forward. Foligno checks that off. They needed a depth defenseman. They added Ben Hutton. I think they could have maybe gone for something a little bit more substantial there. They gave a fifth for Hutton. I saw Kulikov go to Edmonton for a fourth. I think Kulikov is, a bit better, but can't complain too much. Just the depth defenseman, just some insurance for the playoff run. And then I think the most surprising move was they actually went out and got a goalie.
Yep.
Which for me, based on how Anderson's playing and based on obviously his health situation that's up in the air still, I think that was kind of the X factor. Where are they going to really add a goalie here for this playoff run? Just that added insurance in case Anderson can't go, and they did it. So I think they checked off every single box they needed. I don't think they overpaid for anyone really, and I think they're just set up for a great playoff run, especially when you look around the North Division and see that no one else really added as much as the Leafs did. So they're just in a great spot.
So you define it as a success. Does that mean you buy into this whole theory that this year's draft is a little different, right? So the first round pick, I mean, that's a huge unknown at this point, knowing what we know about junior hockey and the year it's been for them. Are you buying into that whole idea?
Yeah, it's a mix of that and also the fact that the Leafs do have, a pretty good prospect pool still, right? They kept all their top prospects in Sandin, Liljegren, Robertson, Amarov. So they're pretty set for the future, at least, with that high-end talent. They didn't dip into their prospect pool. And yeah, like you said, it is a bit of an unknown for this draft. And the fact that it's a later first-round pick, more of a second-round pick is probably what pushed them over the edge.
Yep, I'm with you. I think that with Dubas, it was – I don't want to say an overpayment because we just don't know. But it is a surprise. Let's be honest here. A first-round pick for Nick Foligno at this point. I'm a Kyle Palmieri fan. I thought he would have fit great on the Maple Leafs roster. So that's why I'm a little taken back by the whole thing. But if Kyle Dubas didn't want Taylor Hall, he didn't want Taylor Hall, right? And if he didn't believe he was a fit, good, right? He made that judgment, and that's what he believes. Now, the Riddick, this intrigues me, because I don't know what's going on in Frederik Andersen right now. We are under the understanding that Jack Campbell's the guy. I mean, that is it. We understand that now. Game one of the playoffs, I expect Jack Campbell to be in the crease. Give me a percentage. Frederik Andersen is in a Toronto Maple Leafs uniform next year. What are the odds?
For me, it's going to be really low. I'll give you 20%.
Okay.
I think, first of all, with the cap situation, he's making $5 million. I don't think the Leafs are willing to put that kind of money towards a goaltender at this point next year. So unless he's willing to take a substantial pay cut, maybe $3 million, something like that, I don't think Anderson's interested in that. I know he's had a down year. Even last year, he was a bit down based on his averages. So I think he'll end up testing the market and probably just going to the highest bidder because in my view, the Leafs are going to end up going more of a cheaper tandem with Campbell and, even a Riddick type guy will probably be fine just to split, 40 games each or so.
Yeah, you know what? Campbell, Riddick, that's a tandem that you can go in with. I mean, I don't want to say Calgary's had the greatest goaltending situation in the world over the last few years, but they've gone in that direction. A tandem. A lot of teams do it. You've seen Dallas almost go in that direction in a way. It's funny, Chris. I think one of the first times that you came on the show, it was after the Leafs played Columbus in the qualifying round, and we talked about, hey, Jack Campbell, he might be an option, like a real option moving forward if it goes that way, and it has. And it's funny how everything's kind of come full circle here. Now we're talking about how Jack Campbell's going to start game one of the playoffs for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's go more of a North Division point of view here, and we're still going to relate it to the Leafs in a way. But Winnipeg, would you believe that they would give the Leafs the toughest playoff series? I'm done with the regular season and talking about who can challenge the Leafs for first place. I don't care anymore. I'm talking about playoff series. Who's going to give the Leafs the toughest series?
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? Because we've seen all these teams, play some good hockey against the Leafs, and we've seen them all, put some stinkers up against the Leafs. It's an interesting division in that some teams can look great on some nights and terrible on others. So I guess for me, it's a toss-up probably between the Jets and the Canadiens as the toughest series. Just because I think the Jets have the best goalie, obviously, in Hellebuck. He's basically having like a Vezina caliber season over there. he can steal a game. He can steal a series on his own, I think. I don't think the Jets have the greatest roster personally. I think a lot of their success has been based on, yeah, they have good offense, but a bit of a weaker defense and just Hellebuck stealing a ton of games for them and covering up their mistakes. So, yeah, like I said, Hellebuck can steal a series. And then you go over to the Canadians who they don't have the star power up front that the Jets do, obviously. And they don't quite have the same goaltending. They have a bit of a tandem over there as well with Price and Allen. But it's just their top to bottom lineup is really steady, really consistent, well balanced. And you look at their 5-on-5 numbers, and they're just a really dominant team at 5-on-5. Now they don't have the scoring to back that up most nights, but just the fact that they're gonna be in the game almost every night. They're gonna give you a challenge, and every game's gonna be close. And we, even last night we saw where the Canadians, I think, badly outplayed the Leafs for most of the game. So that might be a bit of a taste of what we're going to see come playoff time.
You didn't mention Edmonton. Let's address the elephant in the room here with both McDavid and Draisaitl. What's the holdup on Edmonton in your mind?
I just think based on what we've seen this season and over the past few years, where the Leafs have just pretty much dominated the Oilers, generally speaking, I think they're basically a two-man team, right? With McDavid and Draisaitl. Other than that, there's not much offensive depth. If Tyson Barrie's on your top pairing, I don't think your blue line is that strong. In net, they're okay. Once again, kind of a tandem situation. Not the greatest goalies, not the worst, but yeah, like I said, you just really have to shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. If you hold those guys to 2-3 goals a night, you're probably going to win.
There's also a rivalry element with Montreal and Toronto, which is why I think by proxy, they're going to be in the mix when we talk about a tough playoff series that Toronto's going to run into. I mean, you see last night, right? And you saw opening night, the first game of the season. The playoff series might be a lot of games like that, which should scare both fan bases. It's going to be high blood pressure games, as we call them, between Montreal and Toronto from a coaching fan perspective. It's real interesting because I think we know the 4 teams that are going to be in the playoffs here in the North Division. And now we got to look at series, right? I mean, it could be Toronto, Montreal first round. It really could be. We haven't seen that in decades, and it could happen in a season like this. Do you believe that Montreal is the kind of team, if there is one in this division, that's going to upset the Leafs? I don't want to use the word upset because they wouldn't appreciate that probably too much in Montreal, but that's a series where you say, yeah, you know what? I bet you Montreal wants Toronto in the first round. They probably want Toronto over Edmonton or Winnipeg in the first round. They want the Leafs.
I think, yeah, in terms of upsets, that would probably be the biggest one. I think based on what you said, yeah, the rivalry. And I don't know, just kind of the narratives going into this season where both fan bases kind of pegged their teams as the top of the North Division. There was a lot of hype around Montreal going in the season. And they haven't had the success they wanted, but they're looking like a playoff lock. And they're looking, I think it's over 50% chances they're going to end up facing the Leafs in the first round now. So that's probably all they wanted for this year is get a shot at the Leafs in the playoffs, get a chance to knock them out, and a chance to frankly embarrass them. So the thing about that playoff series is all the pressure is going to be on Toronto because that is a must-win series for them. If they don't win that series, it's a complete failure, and the whole team from management down looks like failure. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of pressure on Toronto.
It's Lock It Up Sports Talk, Fine Subtle Network, and on ASTV. My name's Logan Lockhart. Chris, I think last time you were on the show, we were talking about how we were confused about the Claude Julien firing, and now Ducharme's come in, and Ducharme has had a pretty good run here. Are you prepared to say that Ducharme, in fact, is the guy to lead this team, the Canadians, into the playoffs? Are we confident in that now?
Yeah, actually, someone asked me this on Twitter a few days ago, or I saw a graphic on Sportsnet, I believe, and it was interesting where if you look at the stats, especially 5-on-5 and like goals per game, goals against, all that kind of stuff, between Julien and Ducharme, they're almost identical for Montreal over their stints. So I'm still a Claude Julien believer. I still think he's one of the best coaches in the NHL, or was when he had a job. I don't think it was much of an upgrade still. Like I said, if you look at the records, I don't think Montreal's played much better under Ducharme. I still think it was kind of a save face move by Bergevin, if you want to call it that, kind of his last bullet in the chamber to save himself. Because Montreal was obviously had a bit of a disappointing start to the year, but ultimately, I don't know. They're still a very solid team at 5-on-5, but I don't think they really gained anything by getting rid of Julien.
Who's more on the hot seat, Bergevin or Benning, GM of the Canucks?
Ooh. It's weird because I think they both should have been fired already, probably. I'm going to say Benning, just because at least Bergevin has kept his team competitive. But Benning has just made a ton of like head scratcher moves, and their cap situation in Vancouver is going to be really tight with all these young stars to sign, and so many older depth players to these long-term contracts. It's just a bad situation over there.
Interesting. I think that's almost been a conversation. I feel like we've had that conversation in the hockey world for about 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
And they've been around, both of them, for 4 or 5 years, right? So, Benning, the thing about Benning is that there's been ups, let's be honest, we'll be fair about it. There's been ups there, but then when the downs happen, it kind of crashes down and it affects a lot of the roster. Bergevin has really bought himself a lot of time recently because he was on an incredible hot seat. Forget in this country, I'm talking about in the entire league. There was not a hotter seat than Marc Bergevin, the one he was on. Before we move on to some of the other transactions around the NHL yesterday, let's go Calgary Flames. I'm incredibly intrigued by the Flames here. I was a big fan when they brought in Daryl Sutter. I said this is the move they had to make. Good for Treville, good for him to really have the guts to go out and be firm and make this move. I'm starting to now believe that Sutter, not a big fan of this roster. And that's fine, because in the offseason, they're going to build this team and retool this team to the liking of Daryl Sutter, and then they'll be in much better shape. Do you believe that this roster is good enough to be compatible with Daryl Sutter's method?
I mean, yeah, as configured, probably not. I think we've already heard him take some shots at the work ethic of his stars like Johnny Gaudreau, so not sure if he's a huge fan of those guys. I remember even when the Leafs beat them a week ago or so, he's like, oh, their big centers scored and ours didn't. So the guy's always good for a quote, right? He's a funny guy. But in terms of Sutter coming in as coach, I'm not personally sold on the fit, just because when did he win the cups with the Kings? Was it 2012, 2013?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's not that long ago. It's about 7-8 years now, but the game has progressed a bit. It's getting faster every year, right? The NHL is more skilled players and smaller players coming into the league every year. So Daryl Sutter is still kind of about that physical, hard game where, I guess I'd be worried that he's looking to bring in more, Milan Lucic type players, where I don't think that's necessarily the direction they need to be going.
Yeah, that would be a concern. Now Lucic, I got to say, has looked okay under Sutter, but you cannot be bringing in guys like Lucic, right? And you can't be paying them big money. You see now the Canucks are almost doing that in a way. But yeah, you know what? With Sutter, I give it time. I give it time in Calgary. I'm a real believer in Daryl Sutter, and I like what they did there. Now, I was real intrigued by Vrana and Mantha, a swap between the Capitals and the Red Wings yesterday. This was kind of a last-minute buzzer-beater trade at the deadline yesterday. I think Detroit, Steve Yzerman, I think they came out on top here. I think this was a brilliant move.
Yeah, I agree 100%. A last-minute buzzer-beater blockbuster basically there, right? So basically Detroit, all they did was downgrade slightly from Mantha to Vrana, and they got a first-round pick and even more on top of that. So, I think definitely Yzerman was the winner of the deadline, 100%.
Yeah. And you know what? I like Anthony Mantha. I like Jacob Vrana, though. And I'm not quite sure how big of a downgrade that is moving forward.
Yeah, if you look at 5-on-5, Vrana's actually out produced Mantha over the past 2-3 seasons. So, yeah, great move.
what's all this talk about the Capitals? And this was a great deal at the. I got the sense that people thought the Capitals won this trade.
I mean, yeah, if you want to look at it from the Caps perspective, I guess you can maybe convince yourself that it's a slight upgrade. Mantha's had a bit of a weird year. I think he's been down in terms of production, and he was benched earlier in the year. So you could argue maybe he moves into a better situation with better line mates, a chance at the cup. He's going to step up his game, maybe find his 30 to 40 goal form again. The fact is, if the Caps make a deep run or win the cup again, then you could argue they won the trade, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And if the Leafs go on a big run as well, you can say the move of Foligno, if he's just a bit of an impact in the playoffs, you can say great move, right? Mm-hmm. Forget the pick. I asked you earlier about teams in the North Division that would give the Leafs the toughest series. I'm going around the league now, and I'm watching what's happening. Incredibly intrigued by the Central Division here with the Panthers and the Hurricanes, the Lightning. This is a real top-heavy division right now. Let's say the Leafs played one of those teams, and I'm looking at Carolina and Florida in particular. What do you think the Leafs' chances would be? I mean, we've seen the Leafs play all these North Division teams, and a lot of them are struggling, let's be honest. How do you think they'd fare outside of this division?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, I think, because honestly, it's none of us know. I don't think any of us have an accurate answer because we just haven't seen these teams play against the Leafs this year. And personally, I've been so caught up in the North Division, I haven't been watching much of these teams, so it's hard to say, right? I know Tampa's obviously a powerhouse every year. Carolina is kind of one of those like sneaky good teams every year, right? They're always in that top 5 to 10 team conversation, kind of like the Leafs, but they're more under the radar because they don't get as much coverage, obviously. But they have some elite offensive weapons. They have a great blue line as well, so very well balanced team. I think they can definitely make some noise this year. And Florida's a huge surprise to me, and I'm sure to most people because they obviously they have the star power up front with Barkov and Huberdeau and those guys. But just, I guess, the goaltending especially has been surprising with Chris Dreiger and net, and just how they've kind of fought through adversity and injuries this year. With, if you look at their lineup, some nights it's just a bunch of players you've never heard of before. So it's crazy they've been able to do this well.
The blue line's been good for years. We've seen Carolina make deep playoff runs over the last few years. So they're a team that you just can't overlook anymore. And if you're overlooking them, you're making a big mistake. Florida's a surprise. We know that. And Tampa Bay is going to be good. We know that as well. East Division, another intriguing division. Pittsburgh's been a surprise for me. I thought after the first couple of weeks of the year, Pittsburgh, I mean, they were going all sell mode. I thought that's the direction they would have to go into, or else it would be a mistake. Pittsburgh, a surprise for you, just like Florida?
Yeah, a bit. I think the thing about Pittsburgh is you can never really count them out just because of, Crosby, Malkin, and that championship pedigree where these guys are just, consummate professionals. Crosby's going to find a way to carry some, AHL guy to a 20, 30 goal year every season. So you just can't count these guys out until they retire, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a surprise for me. You can't count them out, though, because they are going to go down as legends. And you know what? When you look at it in the scope of history, you'd say you're a fool for counting them out, right? If you really look back at it. Quickly at the North Division, before we wrap up here, I want to thank you again for joining us here on the Fine Huddle Network and ASTV, our debut on ASTV. It's Lock It Up Sports Talk. My name's Logan Lockhart. Storylines down the stretch. We're kind of winding down here. Is there anything that you're really looking out for in the North Division, or at this point, you're just ready for the playoffs? You've seen enough.
Yeah, I think basically the first and fourth spots are sealed. I think the Leafs are probably going to end up taking first. I think Canadians are locked into fourth. So it's basically just a battle between second and third, Oilers and Jets. So it's going to be interesting, obviously. We basically know what the playoff matchups are already.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the schedule for the Leafs in about the last, I think, 2 weeks of the season. They end up playing Montreal 4 times. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be, kind of a preview for the playoff series that we're most likely going to see, where there's going to be some bad blood brewing late in the season into the playoffs. So I'm sure it's going to make for a really fiery just a great, a fun to watch series.
Wow, isn't it funny? Over the last, I'd say, well, decade, at least a decade, we've been saying we need more Leafs Habs hockey. We need more rivalry induced on the ice. And now we're going to see them, what you say, another 4 times. Yep. And then in a playoff series. So potentially another 11 times, maybe. We'll see Montreal. So, yeah, it's funny. We all complain about not seeing it enough. And then what happens? Well, we're going to get it a lot. Chris Faria, thank you very much. Tell everyone how they can read you. You mentioned some of your pieces before. Let people know how they can find you, follow you, watch you.
Yep. So you can find me on Twitter at Chris Faria TO, and I'm writing for the Hockey Writers. If you just search my name, Chris Faria.
Perfect. Any pieces that you believe people should really keep an eye out on as we wind down the season and get ready for the playoffs?
Well, I did write a bit of a deadline prediction piece for the Leafs where I was saying they should go for a forward defenseman and goalie. That's exactly what they ended up doing. So that one made me feel pretty good, I guess.
That's exactly what they did. And then you said that the Leafs deadline was a success. There you go. Anyone that you thought was a failure yesterday?
You know what? I'm going to say probably the Jets and Oilers in the North Division, just because I do think those teams have a legit shot at getting out of the division, but they just didn't really add much, especially the Jets. It looks like they just added Jordy Ben, which, I think they probably could have done more.
Could have done more. If the Leafs added Jordy Ben, I bet you we'd be pretty excited. If it's Ben Hutton, if it's Jordy Ben. But either way, the Leafs forward defenseman goalie, that's what they did at the deadline. North Division playoff seedings look to be quite set. That is all for Lock It Up Sportstalk on the Fines Huddle Network and on ASTV. We'll see you next week, Tuesday, 1 Eastern, 12 Central, live, all the platforms that you watch, ASTV. And, of course, Fines Huddle Network. Chris Faria, thank you very much. We'll do this again very soon. Playoff time coming. It's gone by quick. That's the season, 56 games, just like that. Thank you very much. We'll see you then. For Chris Faria, Logan Lockhart, we're signing off.